Hey everyone, welcome to another exciting conversation that I get to have today and you get to be a part of. I want to introduce you to two friends who have been serving, living in Guatemala. And specifically, you're going to hear where God's power has been at work. So join me in this conversation today. Hi, guys.
Hello.
Hey.
Hey.
Good to be here with you.
Yeah, I've got Anthony Van Agen and Grant Lamb. Welcome to our conversation today.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you.
Good to be here.
Obviously, we're talking about the two of you guys, and I know your team you're going to talk today is broader than the two of you, but the two of you are all that we could fit on the couch today. So
Right.
Thanks for showing up, and you're going to highlight for us a little bit of what's happening in Guatemala. But first, let us hear a bit about yourselves. Tell us who you are, where's home churches, that kind of stuff.
Anthony.
Okay. So I'm Anthony Van Ingen. Grew up, born and raised here in Canada till about 18 years old. In Paris, Ontario. I've been going to Koinonia for as long as I can remember. It's been quite a few years. And and back in 2004, called down to Guatemala and kind of never really came back.
So Guatemala is really home in a lot of ways for you.
Guatemala is home. Just last year, I became a resident of the country, which is not an easy process. That's the only reason I hadn't done it before. But with the charity and everything, things all started to line up, and it was finally doable. So.
That's cool. Grant, tell us about you.
My biggest part of Power at Work is Carol, my wife, which is a threesome of us, the three of us in Guatemala. Power at Work wouldn't have happened without her influence and pushing through and doing paperwork and all that kind of stuff behind the scenes, just like your cameraman.
Yeah.
So I went there. I had a missionary 17 years ago asked me to come to Guatemala, and I says, you know what, I don't want to go, I'll give you some money. And he said, God never said give money, he said go. And it was like God grabbed me by the scruff of the neck and said, I'm going. And I did not want to go. I farmed. I was happy in my field by myself.
Yeah.
And but I went, and I came home saying within 3 to 5 years, I'm going to have my farm sold and build a house in Guatemala.
Wow.
And in the 5th year, I sold my farm, and little did I know I was building a house right beside Anthony.
We're going to have to hear about how that relationship started.
Yep.
But you're married to Carol.
Yep.
Who's been your wife for how long?
8 years.
Testing you. Yeah.
8 years.
Okay. And she's, as you said, an integral part of this ministry down in Guatemala.
Yeah, she adds a part. Anthony is great with the kids, the young boys. Carol throws in where she has a relationship with young teenage daughters or girls, and so that just makes a whole family unit better.
Yeah.
Just enhanced it better.
Yeah.
Right.
Cool. So you mentioned charity, and Grant, you mentioned Power at Work. Anthony, tell us about what is Power at Work? What's this charity or this ministry organization?
Okay, so Power at Work started a few years ago, and it was just, really, I forget how many years ago, but there was a verse that just stood out to us in the Bible, and it's Ephesians 3:20, that God wants to bless us exceedingly and abundantly more than we can ask or imagine, according to the power at work in us.
Yeah.
And so we started sharing that with families, and we started sharing that with individuals. And we always share that the biggest blessing is salvation. It's like, you can have a big house, you can have amazing cars, whatever. But when it comes down to it, if you don't have salvation, that all stays here. So we started putting that on the picnic tables that we build to give to families that don't even have tables in their homes and stuff. And so it was a way in to give them a practical gift, kind of like the shirt off your back. It's but it's like something that they can use in their homes on a daily basis, brings families together. But then Ephesians 3:20, that declaration is always right there in front of them. And so we did a few hundred picnic tables, trying to find different organizations where we could put money through. There'd be somebody that wants to send money, and it's like, okay, how can we make this work, right? And it's always tricky, trying to work under or with organizations and all that. And we started to feel led. It's like, okay, are we supposed to start our charity? And Grant's like, yeah, we got to do this. And I'm just like, yeah no. So anyways, he really pushed for it. And that was when I'm pretty sure Carol came up one day with the name. It's like, why don't we call it Power at Work? And it's like, okay, that's interesting because it definitely gets your brain kind of going. Like, okay, what's this Power at Work? Are you guys like energy people or something? Like they work for Hydro Ontario or whatever it is.
Yeah.
And so I know he's wanting to jump in right now. But yeah, so we started the organization Power at Work to be able to grow with God.
Yeah.
Like, because he definitely wanted us to do more.
Yeah.
I was a little reluctant. It's like, I'm kind of happy, with this slow movement. And, but it's been amazing the last few years. I know he wants to jump in. So.
Grant, tell us what's behind Power at Work. We hear about picnic tables, but
on the farm, I've had I use that verse Ephesians 3:20. I wrote it down and stuff. And 10 years ago, we're looking at a family that needed something, and we said, "Hey, we need a picnic table." They could use a picnic table, and the very first table we built was we wrote Ephesians 3:20 on it. I'm pretty sure.
Can I jump in?
Yes.
Yeah. And so it was really interesting because this is a house that, if I could show you the picture, it's like it was a hut made with very cheap, like sheet metal steel. Water would drip through it and everything. And so the father had made kind of like a little table with just some random boards, and so we gave them the first picnic table, and that's when the picnic table project started. What's interesting is we declared Ephesians 3:20 over their family.
Yeah.
They were squatters.
Yeah.
And they had really nothing, and that turned into Ephesians 3:20 for them. We ended up buying them a piece of land and building them a house of their own.
Whoa.
Also, and so it's like that's the Ephesians 3:20 starting to work in their lives.
Yeah.
And so just as God leads us, right?
Yeah.
And that table is still sitting in front of their house. So these things last, and they treasure them.
Yeah.
But again, it is just a tool to get in, to speak the gospel, and we've just been extremely blessed with that.
Yeah.
And so we, like Carol's always saying too, the power that works in us. Everybody who's a Christian has that power that's in us.
That's so
the
true.
same power that rose Christ from the dead.
Yeah.
So we challenge people, what are
Yeah.
you doing with that power?
Yeah.
And we also there's a verse that says, the steps of a righteous man are ordered of God, but you have to step.
Mm-hmm.
And once you step once, watch where God will go.
Yeah.
And sometimes our simple little prayer is, I ask a question, and I remember at church, and Anthony's my translator because I don't speak Spanish.
Okay.
And I said, does everybody here want what God wants to give them, right? Mm-hmm. And everybody wants that. And my next question is, then you have to say, God, do anything in me to get it.
Yeah.
And I farmed my whole life. And for me, exceedingly abundant would have been a lot bigger tractors, more land, bigger barns.
Yep.
And God made me get rid of all of that. And my biggest blessing I've ever had in my life is probably when I can hand out a picnic table to somebody that has absolutely nothing. And they tell us, I thought God had forgotten about us, but you came and you gave us something. And so it's been amazing. And but again, Anthony, his core stability has actually been his home church, Koinonia, because everybody needs a foundation. Everybody needs something that they can kind of rely on, go back, refuel. And Koinonia for 18, 19 years has always been that stable,
constant.
So I don't think people back in Koinonia or other home churches that send out missionaries realize how important that is. Mm-hmm. They need a fuel line. Nobody on the front lines in an army can do anything without somebody giving them food, somebody giving them fuel. They're useless. Yeah. And so important, home churches. Don't ever think if you're not there that you're not doing something.
Yeah. That is so cool to hear that. And Anthony, you mentioned Koinonia has been your home church for so long. Grant, what is it? You and Carol come from Brantford?
we come from Waterford, but we
Waterford.
actually go to a church, Cayuga Christian Fellowship.
Oh, yeah.
And they've been to Guatemala, and they were a big part in this house that Anthony is talking about in building.
Yeah.
They helped
that
finish
church.
that
Yeah, so
project,
tell us about where you work, where you live. Talk about that.
in Guatemala?
Yeah.
Okay, so it's a very rural community. It's down on the coast. It's by a town. It's between a town called Chiquimulia and Guazacapan. It's actually referred to as the community of Poza de Agua. So it's well of water.
Okay.
And so to me, it's the perfect place on earth. I love it. And it's where God called us to.
Yeah.
And to enhance on what he just said about the water thing, when we were building our compound, we said to other people we want, and it was funny. Anthony started it. It was just a little thing. Instead of a dug well, let's do a drilled well. So we could actually give clean, fresh water to the community, because Anthony had given clean, fresh drinking water to other people. So that kind of spurred him on. And so we planned on drilling a well, and my, big faith guy, me, I says, you know what? It's going to be an artesian well. It's going to...
So that means the water flows out of it by
Constant,
itself, right?
yeah.
But it flows out of the top by itself.
Okay.
And we were down there 125 feet, and I went home that night and told Carol, I said, I guess I better buy a pump. And Carol says, where's your faith? And the next morning we come up, there was clean, fresh water coming out of the well.
Yeah, just running out.
And it was coming out and clean. I mean,
Yeah.
clean.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
And-
it's pure water. So the people in the community, sorry to interrupt, but sometimes the community water won't run for 2-3 days, sometimes 2 weeks. So we have a tap that runs out to the outside of our property, and they can come by and fill their water jugs and all that. And so
Yeah. Oh, wow.
We in hardly ever we have a tap in our house where you can turn it on and drink from the tap, which is a God thing. That's exceedingly abundantly.
well, even the
more.
well was much more than what I could have imagined.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
18 years ago, being where we are now, it's like
So you mentioned this property that you've got, and what's on this land and property that you're able to make picnic tables and.
Okay, so on our property, it's about a half an acre. We have 2 small homes, mine and Grant's,
Yeah.
and Carol's.
Yeah.
And then we have a big workshop, a small soccer field, and basically kind of a parking area that's a multi-use piece of property that the kids use for biking and flickering and skateboarding and anything that, just to kind of keep them off the road. So
Tell them a typical Sunday morning.
typical Sunday morning is...
all Sunday. What happens on a Sunday?
Okay,
Go for it.
So on a Sunday morning, if it's a typical Sunday morning with Carol there'll be about 120 people from the community that come in to get a waffle. We call it Waffle Sunday.
Yeah.
So we open up a waffle bar for the community. So you get 100 at least people, families coming through to have some family time and just bring the community together. We focus on really bringing the community together and families together. It's like that's what we're called there for.
Yeah.
So we do Waffle Sunday in the morning. Then we take a smaller group to church, kind of whoever we can fit into the car. And then after church, basically anybody that lives around the compound just kind of comes back in. And all afternoon we play games. There's a trampoline. They do water sports. They do wet trampoline,
Yeah.
and then we end the day with soccer. So that's a Sunday.
fun.
I think that's about it, right?
Yeah. So it's you're mentioning more people involved on this compound and with the picnic tables. Who makes the picnic tables and for this blessing that you send out?
I was the principal builder of all the picnic tables
Okay.
up until a year ago, roughly. I was the guy that pushed.
Yeah.
And Anthony is good at... Anthony is like, well, if the kids can't be involved, Anthony really doesn't want. So the picnic table was kind of my project. But then so the kids would go out with us, out to their families. So Anthony taught the kids how to make the picnic tables. And I have not made a picnic table in a year. These kids make them.
Yeah.
They do an amazing job, and it gives them a trait. A trade. They learn how to. They cut all the lumber. They measure all the. And Anthony's a taskmaster. He makes them measure. I had jigs. He won't let them use jigs. They have to measure. They have to know what an eighth of an inch is or a quarter,
Great.
and they have to do it.
Yeah.
And they make them all. And we sent down we hammer them in or use a screw gun, but we also have a nail gun, and it's worth it. I never used a nail gun in my life until I went to Guatemala, and it's priceless to see these kids with a big nail gun. It gives them a sense of
12-year-olds with this 3-inch nailer, and it's like they're bang, bang.
but it gives them a self confidence, right?
Yeah, and I'm very much like, my heart is to like train them. And like Grant said, if the kids can't be involved, it's hard for me to be involved because I'm there for the Guatemalans.
Yeah.
I'm there to show them the love of Jesus and train them in what I can train them. It's using your gifts and abilities to be able to enhance their lives.
Yeah.
And not all of them are going to be carpenters. I know that. But it's like with our organization, we've been blessed to be able to incorporate them in the building, the unloading, in the learning how to make them, and they're a part of delivering them. Sometimes they share, even if it's just a little bit, but it's working them into the next generation of what power work could be. Because like we have 3 other staff, volunteers that work with us that are nationals, and like one of them is Edwin. He's worked with us since 2004, and he was, I think, 9 or 10, but he just started coming along with everything that we were doing, and now he's actually the one that stays on base while I'm up here, and so he just keeps everything going with Nim and Estefania. And Estefania came through the children's home that I volunteered with for probably 10 years also, and so being able to meet, like they come into your lives and be able to pour into them and then watch them grow in such a way that you can also pull them into be a part of what God has called you to is really cool.
Yeah.
It's kind of like you with Nick, right?
Yeah.
It's like that's probably just like, this is so cool.
Yeah.
One thing, like when I first went to Guatemala, 204, I had a good shop on the farm, and I went there once for 2 weeks. So I come home and I said to God, and this is how I pray. I just said, God, I'd like this shop in Guatemala.
Yeah.
And last year we're standing in our shop, and I realized that prayer I asked 15 years ago, God answered. Everything. We have everything in our shop we need. We have tools and parts, and it's safe. It's everything, more than enough. It is Ephesians 3:20.
Wow.
And so God answered that prayer. So I translate that to Anthony, and he translates that to the kids.
Yeah.
Because sometimes kids need to go, you ask a prayer to God, it doesn't happen tomorrow. And it can't be a selfish prayer either. Like I had no clue how many lives that would change by having a shop in Guatemala.
Yeah.
So everything we do, we try to iterate to show them how God is involved in this. This is not Anthony and I and Carol. We could not do this we didn't think big enough.
Yeah.
And God just can't, God is just so big.
Yeah.
So.
And as you share this, so you're teaching the kids, which are boys and girls, a variety of ages, right up through their teen years.
Yeah, we got some that are 9 years old, and they're good at sweeping and watching.
Yeah. And then, as you said, you've got older ones
And
that
then
will
we've
even...
got 16, 17, 20. Like I had one that came back he moved a few hours away, and he works at with TELUS at a call center, and so on his free time sometimes he comes down to be able to work in the shop. So yeah, you got adults, you got kids.
Yeah. And you're
Right.
teaching them, as you say, how to
and so
use the tools.
it's a daily activity. They come in depending on what projects and everything we have. We're teaching them. We're very hands-on and practical in the way of we live with the community. We do life with them.
Yeah.
We go through what they're going through with them, and walk with them. And so it's
Yeah.
very much like shop class at school, but it's in a safe environment
Yep.
where they can just grow and learn.
And
Like for
Yep.
one instance, somebody came and Anthony noticed they had cut themselves, or their arm, their hand,
He had broken his arm.
broken their hand.
In my opinion, he had broken his arm.
And so instantly, Anthony takes them to the doctor, and that's a nice part. We can fix that, right? So we don't just try to go home until you're better.
You're right.
Try to look after that issue right
yeah,
there.
the bigger needs.
Yeah, and
Because down there they don't have health care and all that, where
Yeah.
the family's like, we don't know what to do. And so
Right.
it's like, I'm looking at his arm and his one hand's like
Yeah.
stuck in this position. I'm like, yeah, we need an x-ray.
Yeah. Yeah.
And Anthony is, and when I say Anthony, because he speaks the Spanish, so he deals with all the kids all the time, and he's very good at what I say is what I mean. There is no back talk. There is no bullying. There is no. They have to obey the rules that are in the shop, and once you get them to know that.
They're very good kids.
They are.
They are really.
And so we're very, very fortunate that way. But we can also relay that when God tells us to do something, He's not okay if we do part of what He says. God doesn't want 99% obedience. He wants 100%. Because if you're 99% obedient and on that 1% you walk out in front of a train, well, the 99 didn't do you much good.
Yeah. Yep.
So,
Well, if you went to heaven.
There's still a reward, right?
so we try to tell them always in every situation when he's doing things that make it related back to what did God do. Like we got a new planer, and sometimes I tell Anthony's nuts because we had two planers. He calls one day and he said, I think we should have a bigger planer. And I says, Anthony, and he says they're like $3,000. And I said, Anthony, we have two planers and we don't have $3,000. So like, that's just dumb.
Yeah, so he's like, we don't have the money, so.
Yeah, dumb. 2 days later, he calls me back. He says, I put it up on Facebook. Somebody donated the money for the whole new thing. And I was like, oh, okay, fine. And it worked. So sometimes I think his ideas are nuts. And they are. But they're
If that's
right.
what God's putting on our heart.
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
like,
If God puts
and-
it on your heart, then it's not a silly idea. He'll fulfill it. And
Yeah.
Sometimes I've been sitting there and I'm like, really? It's like, really? It's like, really, God? And then it's like, okay. And then it ends up happening. And it's like,
Wow.
okay, why do we limit? Why do we think it's too much or a lot of stuff? That's impossible. It's like,
Could you tell them about the story about when you were building the roof and it was like they come to a
I'm just
stalemate?
wondering if he has any questions.
Oh, that's a great
Okay.
one. Go for it. I wanted to hear
Okay,
stories
so-
of God,
so throw
God
it,
at work.
Throw it out there again.
The question
He can edit this out.
you were having problems with the roof structure. I'm in Canada and I'm just saying build. And he was having trouble with the roof structure because it's
Okay.
on an angle a little bit.
Yeah.
So God moments.
Yeah.
Sometimes, really, they happen so often that sometimes it's like you forget a lot of them. I don't know if. And that constantly is happening down there. Like, one day we were building as Grant was saying, the construction for the roof. But we weren't building a roof on a square. One side had a completely different angle, and so it added a lot of work for the welder. And I'm up there with the welder, and not to say I don't know everything, but I knew kind of what had to be done, and they weren't understanding me and wanted to do it another way. And it's just like we weren't getting anywhere. It was being done wrong. It was getting frustrating, and I had somebody coming that day. It's like, what's the worst thing you could have is like an appointment when one thing's not going right, and then you're going to throw in somebody's coming to pick up food, because we also import food from Canada, from Ontario Christian Gleaners, to be able to distribute in the country. And so they were coming to get some food from us to work at in their feeding programs. And I'm just like, oh, this is just, it's so much. Well, the guy coming to pick up food drives into the base. He's like, oh, cool. It's like, you're doing a roof. That's what I do. I build roofs. And I'm like, oh, can you help me? He's like, what's going on? So I explained to him, and he's like, oh, okay. So he goes up and he's looking at stuff. He's like, oh yeah, it's like, and he starts talking to the welder, who just wasn't getting it. He's an amazing guy, and we've worked with him for years, but he just wasn't understanding how to do this roof because of the one back wall. And he's like, can I help you guys? It's like, yes. He's like, can I use this grinder? Well, he just started cutting a few different things. And this is a massive roof over, 40-foot containers.
Yeah.
So it's not just something.
It's 70 by 60. So.
Okay, yeah.
So it's 70 by 60.
Yeah.
It's huge.
Yeah.
And within 20 minutes, he had fixed it.
Wow.
And we loaded up his truck. And I'm like, you were sent by God.
And we never saw him again.
And he took the food, and I haven't seen him since. But
Wow.
So for that moment of frustration, for God to send to me the perfect person to pick up food, I was just, sitting there just afterwards going, that was just so awesome.
So amazing to be a part of, right?
So amazing to see that, God in that moment of need sends the exact person for something else, but or was it for something else?
Or both, yeah. So, and you've talked about these kids you work with, and you're showing the love of Jesus. And then you've talked about taking the picnic tables and sharing the love of Jesus. And that's exactly what our vision is here at Koinonia, is we want to be able to show and share the love of Jesus. Amen. And as you talk about some of these kids, can you talk about them or their families? And God's at work. Where have you seen a life transformed or a family transformed through this ministry as you come and bring a picnic table, but you're also bringing the message of who God is?
You know what? Like every kid that's in our shop, it's a life transforming for them. Because where they would be without it is, I don't know where they would be.
Yeah.
And that's sometimes we try to maybe even spiritualize it a little bit, but sometimes we can't. We see where they are now, but we have no imagination where they could have been.
Right.
And what they're doing now, like when these kids work in the shop, we have Christian music playing all the time. When they're playing soccer, we have Christian music playing. And even that's a God thing, because we had somebody sent down a great big speaker and amplifier or whatever. It sat there for a year. He didn't even know whether it worked. Yeah. And that's what they listened to. So sometimes I don't necessarily can't say, wow, I see a big difference. But it's kind of like that shop, that prayer that I prayed 15 years later. I don't think we will ever see this side of heaven what we have saved these kids from. Mm-hmm. By you can never ever go wrong, even if you don't see them all of a sudden become missionaries, but we can't see the life changing in their life it is.
Yeah.
That to me is priceless.
Yeah.
Because they know without a shadow of a doubt why we're there.
Yeah.
And we would not be there unless God made us there.
Yeah.
And as far as transforming lives, I don't see somebody went from a black to a white. I see somebody that's transforming them so they will be different the rest of their life.
Yeah.
And we want them at Power at Work to realize this is everything.
Yeah.
Not how much you have, not your bigger house, not your bigger, and they see that.
Yeah. Yeah. And what I hear in that, Grant, is it's a quote that we've used around here before, is it's easier to raise a child than to fix an adult. Yep. And I see you doing that. You're raising them up and you're seeing their lives transformed as they're growing.
Yep.
So it's a process that's happening.
Yeah. And for me, like, it's changed the youth lives so much, but it's like I'd focus on, even the ones that are now working with us, like Edwin at 9, just kind of tagging along with everything that we were doing. And now he's basically taking over for us while we're here. So it's like the three of us are here in Canada. We're the ones that kind of started it and everything, but it's like it doesn't stop because we're here. He's still continuing with all of everything that we do.
Yeah.
And so, he's been working with us for 18 years. So it's awesome to see. And I mean, he's from a broken home. Growing up nowadays is not easy at all, highs and lows through the years. And so when we brought him on to staff, it was just, volunteer. It was awesome to be able to watch him grow, make it so that he could grow. And like a Stefania who came through the children's home, like she came from horrible background, bad situations, growing up in a children's home. I worked in them. It's not easy at all. Mm-hmm. You're one of 30, 40, 50, depending on the month. And, there's workers there to help, but you don't have your family, you don't have stability, you don't know what the government's going to decide, because the government at times just says, you've been in this home for too long, so we're going to move you to another one.
Yeah.
And down in Guatemala, because at one point we got told that 2 years was too long for a child to be in a home. So they would just move them to another one if they didn't have options. And so to watch her go through that, and then start Bible school, and then start with the feeding program with us, and then to grow in, get married and have her own family. And then the family kind of gets pulled in, because it's not just Nim and Estefania. That's the couple. Chris is there, which is their 2-year-old son. And Lindsay is the stepdaughter to Stefania. She's 13. And she's just as involved with everything that's happening. And so watching their lives change and be able to bring them on and watch them continue to grow as they pour out, our heart also, like the heart of God, that the heart that he's given us has been passed on to them, and they just keep reaching out.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes, like, if God, for me, you have to be obedient. Results is not part of God's plans. That's up to him, results. Our job is to be obedient. If we are obedient and teach the kids what we're supposed to, if nobody ever gets saved, that doesn't mean we can't keep doing what we're doing. We don't do anything based on results. We try to base it on obedience. God has called us there to Guatemala. He's called us to this community, and we try to do the things that we're supposed to do. And then all positive outcomes comes from God. It's not us. We
just
have,
point them.
We have to be obedient. And again, like Koinonia has to be obedient. Some days you don't feel like sending money to missionaries, but you guys do it because you're obedient. And the outcome, whether Anthony uses all of that money correctly or incorrectly, that's not your job. Your job is to support him. And so we try to, I think that's kind of what we do with that community and the kids.
So exciting.
My focus is always trying to show Jesus through everything that I do.
Yeah. That is so neat. And I've seen that over the years. I've had the chance to come down and visit you in Guatemala a few years ago, but I see that it's like you make use of every opportunity, every situation, whether it's working in the shop or playing soccer out in the field or taking the kids on a delivery of a table or part of the feeding program. Your desire is to show the love of Jesus to the kids you're taking and to the family you're ministering and serving. That's so exciting. But some people listening to this conversation might think, well, God's at work, power at work. God's power is at work in Guatemala. But does God work here in Canada? So before our conversation started, you were even sharing with me a story of where God's providing for kids. Do you want to share that story now?
Yeah, so power at work hugely depends on the Canadian side also. So saying, does God work here? It's like, it's amazing. So it was just yesterday, we got a message. So, with working with so many donors and everything, sometimes you have donors come on and sometimes they can't continue supporting one of their kids. our organization right now is sponsoring 100 families roughly. And so that's mainly to keep them in school. That's the focus of the program. So sometimes it goes towards tuition, and other times towards food. And sadly, yesterday, understandably, one of our sponsors messaged us and said that they were going through some issues and they weren't going to be able to continue sponsoring their two kids anymore. And so they were saying sorry. And Carol, she just responded right back. It's like, God's got this. It's like, it just sent that back to them. It's like, don't worry about it. Well, it wasn't a few hours. It was just a few hours later, she gets a message and we had received $600. Well, it's $320 for the year. So it's $320 to sponsor one of the kids for a year. And so she's like, well, I know exactly where that money's supposed to go. That's pretty obvious. And it wasn't, for anything specific. So she said, basically, thank you. This is what's happening. Some people are going through some financial crisis and all that. And you guys just literally answered a prayer that was just in a passing moment type thing. And,
so neat.
And she said, they're looked after for 10 months with your donation. And it was just a few minutes later, she got another 120, and they said, let's make that a year.
Yeah.
And this couple, we're pretty sure, actually is going through the same financial problems that the other couple, no, they went through the same financial issues that the other couple are going through right now.
Wow.
And so we're hoping that we can use this also to encourage them that, yes, you're going through this, but you're not stuck there.
So cool.
You can come out, and in a few years, you might be able to do this in Guatemala or here. And even just on the way up, we came driving into Bloomingdale, and we were a little early, so we just kind of took a drive out. And one of the things we do is also we ship bikes down to Guatemala and basically whatever good quality stuff we can get. Bicycles.
Okay.
Shoes, clothes, computers. We get lots of donations, and so we've been sending a 40-foot container to Guatemala every year. Not filled completely by us. We work with other organizations and partner together, but we're always looking for bicycles and stuff because down in our community, most kids, it's like they never imagined owning their own bike.
Yeah.
And just down the road here, we picked up 5.
Wow.
So it's like, just being in the right place, and God, told them to put those 5 bikes out. I guess they're for us. They're for some 5 little Guatemalan kids next year, probably. So.
Yeah. What I hear in your hearts as you share is your life and your journey with God, your relationship with Him is a daily relationship. It's something that you continue to trust in Him, look for Him to provide. Can you talk for a moment about what a relationship with God means to you, your Heavenly Father? Talk to me about your personal faith relationship with God. Anthony, go, and then Grant.
Okay. For me, it's literally like He's there with me all the time.
Yeah.
So it's like I just walk through life with God. It's not like the scary guy on my shoulder, but it's just walking with Him, trusting Him in every moment, and kind of like, waiting for the whispers here and there where it's like, you go here and go there, say this, do that. And, no one's ever perfect. We don't always listen and everything. But yeah, it's very much like just going for life for me is it's ideal if it's a walk in the forest. And it's kind of like, He's just right there with me the whole way along.
Yeah, so neat.
And life isn't always a walk in a forest, but that's just an example of, I'm just always focusing on what does He want to do in me and through me, even if I don't feel like it that moment. But it's like, okay. So.
Yeah. And Grant, talk about you and Carol and your relationship with God.
Carol is an obedient person. Like she doesn't, the way we got married and stuff, it wasn't necessarily like a normal. It's like we have both realized no matter how good of plan we have and how great we think it is, God's got a better plan.
Yeah.
So even if nobody likes walking through the mud. I think of a picture of a soldier walking through water with his gun above his head, walking through the water so his gun does not get wet. walking over to help somebody. It is not fun for him to walk through water that he does not know.
Yeah.
It's muddy, it's dirty, but he sees the destination and he does it. And so Carol and I both probably have saw that it's not fun, all the things we've been through, but God's got a good plan. And you have to focus on what is on the other side of that river.
Yeah.
And for me, my dad died 27 years ago, and him and I, we farmed together. So we talked farming all the time, right? Just like back and forth like this. And it was devastating when he died. And then after about 6 months, I was like, wow. I pretended God was sitting in the chair beside me. And I started talking. So I quit praying 27 years ago, and I just talk to God now. I don't have a...
Pray continuously.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
it's not about, and one thing missions did for me better than anything else, because God says, be in the world, but not of the world. And we, Christians haven't done a really good job of that, because I was in the world, but my brain was thinking bigger, better farming I wanted.
Yeah.
And missions we're only here for a split second in time. We're visiting this planet. This home is not Earth. And once missions, and I think when God says go, if the creator of the universe, the smartest being in the universe, tells you to go somewhere, it's probably good to listen to him and go.
Yep, that's wise.
And so my advice is, listen to that little voice. And if you listen to him, it will be better than anything you could ask or imagine.
Yeah.
And
That is so good.
yeah, and I never had a son. I had 3 daughters, and every farmer wants a son, right, to continue on. But it's kind of neat. God has given me Anthony because he's continuing on in spiritual things.
Right.
And so it's God's plan is so much bigger.
Yeah.
And I know Carol would say the same thing.
Yeah.
She planned on a lot of things. She was going to go to Rwanda or someplace. And so her dream in Guatemala is so much bigger than she could have planned
Yeah.
either.
And God can do more than we can think or imagine, right?
yeah.
And
Every day.
And Grant, I was going to ask, what would you share with us as Koinonia, as a church? And you just basically said it, is to listen to that voice and follow God's lead, and He'll take you in places you could never imagine.
Yeah.
Anthony, what would you say to Koinonia as your home church? Something that you would speak back to us, encourage us with? What would you share?
Yeah, I would just say to the Koinonia family, thank you for the years of constant support and prayer, and financially. It's been a partnership. I can't do what I do without people hearing from God and making what I do possible. And so I love when I'm walking in the foyer after the service, or sometimes even before, and I greet somebody and they just go, "Oh, prayed for you this week," and I'm just like, "Oh." Like that's what we need. And if it's not me, it's like you can pray for another missionary, whoever puts on your heart, and because we're sent.
Yeah.
And I've always felt that, like, I'm in Guatemala, but I'm very much a part of Koinonia.
And what you guys give, it's kind of funny because we watch it, we see it. 50% of all the money that Koinonia gets is for food, and it is not for Anthony. He feeds between 7 and a dozen kids at his picnic table on his porch every day.
Wow.
And one thing I would say for people in Koinonia to go, if you hear that little voice, go, and you don't have to be a missionary in Guatemala, but I think God wants us to go out of our comfort zone because He has something extremely valuable to give to us, and we can't get it in our comfort zone.
Yeah, that's
we
good.
have to walk out.
Yeah.
And once you walk out, you will come back a different person. I guarantee it.
Yeah.
So
That
go.
is so cool. Well, Grant, to you and Carol and to Anthony, thank you for this conversation, but thank you for inspiring us to get out of our comfort zone and to walk by faith and listen for God's little voice. Because when we do that, I'm seeing it in you. You're inspiring me to keep doing it, inspiring others. When we do it, then we get to see God at work.
Yeah.
God's power at work.
Yep.
changing lives and changing and impacting families. And so thank you for this conversation today, and thank you for being obedient to serve God.
Great.
Thank you.
Yeah, bless you guys.
Yep.
I'm going to pray and just finish us off together.
Yep.
Heavenly Father, you are the intelligent, amazing creator and designer of this world. And you have been at work in the lives of many people, but you desire to work in every one of us who says, yes, God, I will follow you and I will put faith in your son, Jesus. And I thank you that Grant and Carol and Anthony have all said yes to you. And now as they speak and lead into other people's lives, they're seeing young children, you're seeing teenagers, they're seeing families respond and believe that you love them and value them. Thank you for being at work through this team and in Guatemala to bring more lives into your kingdom. We praise you and we ask you to keep working, God. Continue to show this team where you are at work so they can join you and see you do more than they've thought or imagined to this point in their lives. God, to you be the glory. Thank you for what you're doing. Amen.
Amen.